Okay, so let's just move back one slide here and thank everybody for being part of this webinar tonight. My name is Lisa Hebgen, and I am the director of the Master of Science for Professional Educators program here at UW-Madison. So even though these folks are not with us tonight, I always like to be able to share who they are. And we have two teaching assistants, and you can see Claire on the screen here, I'm hoping, yes, and Mariana. And so each of these individuals are graduate students at UW, and they support the program and support the students and faculty within the program. So tonight we're just going to give a brief overview of the program, but really be able to answer your questions that you have. So Miss B is fully online. We have asynchronous and synchronous times. Those synchronous times are built around the working professional. We expect all of our students to be working in some capacity, whether that be full or part-time. Maybe that's at a private school, a public school, or any sort of educational organization. And so just wanted to make sure that I said around the synchronous and asynchronous times. Tuition is set at about $800 per credit. So you're looking at a total of about $24,000. And you might ask, well, are there any book fees or other fees that I should be aware of? And there are not. We have very minimal books that we ask you to purchase for the program. So maybe a couple $100 worth, but these are books that you're always going to go back to. Cohort sizes are anywhere between really 20 and 30 students. So the cohort that we have going right now is about 27 students that have been accepted. Our cohort is getting a little bit bigger. And the thing that I always like to talk about is that while we have a very prescribed program, you are really able to bring in the topics that you are most interested in and dive into research and really learn about those spaces in which you are most interested in. And so, how can we do this? Well, we pull from three different departments within the number one school of ed within the nation. So, you will get your degree in educational psychology, which is also number one. And you will also work with faculty from curriculum instruction, as well as educational leadership and policy analysis. We really feel that being able to bring in these three different areas makes for a better, more well-rounded program and for your overall experience. So what does that curriculum look like? So I'm just going to briefly touch on all of the courses. So you start out the summer and you'll take both of the classes of collaborative teamwork for inclusive school reform. And this is a course where we're talking about how do we work within our organizations and think about the voices or the systems that maybe just aren't being recognized, or maybe their voices aren't at the table. And how do we make sure that we look at our organizations and think about, well, what should they look like or what could they look like? And how do we collaborate in order to make these systems and these policies and these different things that we have to work with every day work within our organization? This particular class does have synchronous times during daytime hours, and all the hours that I share with you are Central Time. And so this class this summer meets on Wednesdays from 3 to 5:30. And this is just for 5 of the Wednesdays within the summer. We actually have those dates set. So if you are thinking about this program, I can share those dates with you. Everything again is completely online, those synchronous times. The other course during the summer is education, engaging with education research. And this course is one of those courses where you get to dive into what is that thing you've always wanted to learn more about. So you will do a literature review. So if I think about examples from other cohorts, we've had students dive into, I wonder what are some best practices around brand new teachers? And how do we support them coming into our organizations? Or we've had students look at what are those high leverage or high impact practices that support students with disabilities? Or what about the tier one, tier two, tier three strategies? How do those impact instruction in math? So those are some of the things that people are diving into around their literature review. Then we come into the fall, we have thinking and learning, and this course is a little bit more theory. And this is around the 8 different theories of cognition. So, how is the brain working? How do we take in information and use it? And more importantly, as educators, how do we think about that to inform our instruction? One of the assignments for this particular course is you are actually teaching yourself a new skill. You can choose whatever that skill is. I can think about some students decided they wanted to learn how to sew, or they wanted to learn to do woodworking or calligraphy, all different sorts of things. And what they did is they're teaching themselves that new skill, they're reflecting using journaling and talking about those 8 different theories and how they applied to their process. So, phenomenal assignment. Our students love it. And then we have the first class of the Foundations of Instructional Coaching. And so, because this program has an instructional coaching certificate built right into the curriculum, there is a set of 3 courses, and this is the first one. So, I'm just curious, any of you work with instructional coaches right now or have in the past?
I'm actually in a coaching cycle right now for math.
Oh, I love that. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I haven't had any really experience with instructional coaches at our district.
Okay, thanks. So, with instructional coaching, one of the things that we do is we really pull from 3 gurus. So, we use Jim Knight, whom I always refer to as the godfather of instructional coaching. And so, Jim Knight talks about how do you use powerful questions in order to help others reflect. So, we take on this idea that you, as the coach, are not the expert. You are not doing mentoring, but you are an equal thought partner with that individual. And you're asking those really powerful questions because they're the expert in whatever it is that they're doing in order to move them to wherever it is that they want to go. And we really have a way in which we outline that process. So not only do we use Jim Knight, but we also use Diane Sweeney, who does student-centered coaching. So she talks about how do we gather data, whether that be big or small, formal, informal, whatever that is, in order to guide what we think is happening either within our classroom or our organization or with an individual or whatever it is. We're gathering data. And then the other person that we look at is Elena Aguilar. And we know we cannot do any of this work if people don't trust us. So, how do you build those trusting relationships in order to have these really in-depth conversation around reflection? And we think by using and showing these 3 different types of strategies is that you're really able to build your own. So then you come into the spring, and that is the second course of the Instructional Coaching Certificate, and that is the assessment analysis and instructional decision making. And this is all around how do you not only look at data, reflect on data, gather data, talk about data, make assessments as well. How do you do all of this? And what is the instructional decision process happening? So even if you're not in a K-12 sort of situation, there's lots of data available to us in our organizations. And how are you using that to make whatever decisions it is that you need to be able to make? And then thinking about this as a coach, how do you help others talk about the data they have or think about the data they have in order to be reflective about it? So that's the first year. Any questions about those first year courses? Okay. So we
I
come
just have
into,
one
yeah,
question.
please,
For the
yes.
yeah, for the fall, is that's still asynchronous?
It is. So anytime we have any synchronous times besides that collaborative teamwork, those synchronous times would be in the evening, anywhere between 5 and 8:30 p.m. So, for example, I used to teach the foundations of instructional coaching. So, that particular course, you work within a triad. And so, the triad that you're grouped with is usually around similar interests, similar job, or time zone. And you guys are deciding when you meet on your own. But then, if we had any synchronous times, which during this 15-week course, I would have three, and you usually had guest lecturers. Like you got to hear from Diane Sweeney herself, you got to hear from Jim Knight himself. And so, any of those synchronous times would be in the evening for about an hour or an hour and a half.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah. The thing about it too is the collaborative teamwork ones are mandatory as you get into the rest of the semester, is that those are recorded. Because we know people coach, we know people have other things going on, is that you're not always able to make them. Obviously, you're paying a lot of money for graduate school, so you want to be part of them, but they are not as mandatory as the collaborative teamwork one is. So, great question. So, thank you. Jumping into the next year in the first summer, we have Understanding Legal Rights and Responsibilities. And if you're in Wisconsin, this course is actually one of the courses that our principals take. And so if you were ever to go into the principal prep program for UW, this course actually counts in both programs. And this is all around what is currently going through the US Supreme Court as it relates to education. Spoiler alert, there's a lot. And so this is a course where our students are like, I'm not really sure if I'm interested in this course. And by the end of it, they're like, I should have had this years ago. So fascinating course, fantastic instructor. The other course is supporting students' social emotional well-being, and this is all around how do we think about educating the whole person in front of us. So we talk a lot about, what is regulation? How do we help students regulate? How do we help ourselves show up and regulate? How do we help our colleagues? So in that social emotional learning, we're learning all of these strategies, not to curb behavior, but to be able to meet students where they're at. And so, how do we do that? It all starts with regulation. And that regulation really being how do we approach situations in a really meaningful, authentic way. And so, in this particular course, you're going to be doing a project around what is it that you want to bring to your organization, to your classroom, to whatever that is, around supporting the people that you have in front of you. And then we have the fall, and I'm going to talk probably a little bit more on this particular course because this is a course I actually teach. So the capstone project is a little unique in this master's program because what you're going to be doing during this fall is you are going to be diving in, and I'm going to go becoming an expert on whatever it is that you have always wanted to do. So maybe that you've always wanted to implement this new curriculum, or you wanted to bring in this different style or strategy that you've always been wanting to do. I actually just sat through a presentation last night, and it was about using tier one. Strategies and how does it support this particular poetry lesson, and what is the data they collected, and how did they decide that this particular practice was useful. And so you're surrounded with a committee, so you have a subject matter expert, usually from the university. You will have a project expert who is a graduate of the program, and then you will have a member at large, which is somebody of your own choosing. And they are supporting you through writing of these 5 chapters. And you may decide to do an implementation project, kind of what I described, or you might do an action research project, which is kind of what I described. Or maybe you're thinking, I want to go on to get my PhD and you want to do straight research. And those choices are all available to you. So, what happens is we're talking to you, specifically me, throughout the entire semester and year. And we're talking about what are you most interested in? Why are you interested in it? We get you really narrowed in on the question you're trying to answer. Another project we had for this particular capstone is a student was really interested in what um, what are the results of fourth grade reading tests four states that had similar legislation to Wisconsin reading. And so, she was able to look at different states who implemented different reading policies, and she wanted to see whether or not that had an impact on those reading scores. And again, here's another spoiler alert, it didn't. And so that was something she was very interested in, and she was able to do that as a result of her capstone project. And then finally, we have the practicum in the spring for instructional coaching. You will do this in your own organization with a trusted friend. So I'm going to be quiet right there and go on to my next slide and just ask, what questions do you have regarding anything that I've talked about so far?
I think you might, my computer might have froze when you were talking, but what does the practicum part look like?
Sure. Yep. So you'll do it in your own organization and you will work with a trusted partner. And so usually people are, if they're in a coaching cycle, they might actually flip the script and actually coach with their coach, or they might use a colleague that they've worked with. And so you'll be videoing that, you'll be transcribing it, you will be coaching throughout the entire program. However, it really is the culminating activity for that practicum. But again, you're going to do that in your own organization and finding somebody who's willing to go through coaching cycles with you where you are the coach. Does that help?
Yes, that does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, and I probably froze because I got that little like, your internet is unstable. So I apologize for that.
No worries, not at all.
Yeah, so speaking of the instructional coach, it's a certificate. And so we actually, UW-Madison, worked with the Madison Metropolitan School District, and we created this certificate actually with Diane Sweeney. And so we were the first in the world to create this certificate. I'm an instructional coach. I'm also a professional coach. And I made it part of this program because until I became a coach, I didn't really understand how powerful reflection is in the work that we're doing, or how powerful it is to have a thought partner to talk about what it is you're trying to do, how you're going about it, and to really brainstorm together about what was working, and more importantly, what's not working and how can you move around that. And so coaching really for me was something that was so powerful in making me a better educator. So that's why I wanted it to be part of this particular program. So who has joined this program? I talked a little bit earlier about this. People from all over the world. You don't have to be that K-12 educator. We have traditionally had that role within this program, but in speaking about who has been part of the program since I've been part of it, is we've had doctors, we had a culinary instructor from California, we've had the director of Boys and Girls Club in Canada, we've had people come from Mexico who are in early childhood, Head Start. Your typical K-12 teacher, anywhere from special ed, English, social studies, music has been a big one, art, math, you name it. We have everybody in our program. And again, as you can see on this particular slide, is that people from around the world. So South Korea, China, Jordan, Italy, you name it, we've had people. And that's what's really rich, I think, about this program as well, is you're not just learning from some of the best in the world, but you are learning also from your colleagues from all around the world and what they're doing. And I think that is, if not more valuable. And that just leads into, why do people choose our program? Well, it's high quality. And what I think is really important is engaging with other professionals who are doing this work. We learn the best from each other. It's flexible and we have that strong support for our learners. So I'm just going to quickly talk about the application process. If you are interested, you'll want to get your application done soon. So even though we have this May 1st deadline, it really is like ASAP at this point. There's still time. I'll help you get there. but there's a people are like actually enrolling in their courses right now, so I want to just help you get to that next point if you're still thinking this year. If you're not thinking this year, that's great too. We will send out the new application for the 2027 cohort starting a little bit later in July. So all of this still applies. But that GPA of 3.0 or higher, and that's usually in the last 65 credits that you've taken. And so if you're thinking like, oh my gosh, I'm really, really close to that, I still encourage you to apply. You and I just need to have a conversation. Obviously, a good computer, reliable internet, which apparently I didn't have for a little while, at least some sort of teaching experience. 1 year seems to be what makes the greatest impact for this program to be successful for the learner. Um, it's great that you can be teaching or in working in some capacity during this program, but we're flexible. Like life happens, we get it. So that to-do list, what it looks like here, I'm just going to move this a little bit, is prepare your resume. You have a statement of purpose, and if you look on our website, we lay out what should be in that statement of purpose. And it's really about tell us about yourself, what are your goals, and why does Miss B really fit for you and what you want to do professionally, personally, whatever that may be. Two letters of recommendation, usually from a former or current supervisor, and then a colleague is perfectly fine. Complete all of that online, upload your unofficial transcripts. It will be a little bit later on that we would need your official, and then pay the application fee. But here's the nice thing about that is because you've been part of this webinar tonight, once you get all of these things done, you would just send me an email and we would go ahead and, or we, I guess just me, I would go ahead and send you a coupon code to waive that fee. But you would have to have all of this done and then let me know, and I would send you that code. So that is the process, and this is my contact information. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I am also going to turn off the record button.